Tonight, the entire town flocked to the year's most prestigious gala, the event my parents had been bragging about for months, right before laughing in my face. Still single at 37. They had no idea the evening's host, the one holding the microphone, controlling the stage and their reputation, was my husband, whom I'd secretly married 6 months ago. When the spotlight hits, I'll show my parents that single is the easiest word to say, but swallowing the truth is the hardest part. And by then, the entire ballroom will hear that truth from their own stage. My name is Harper Lane, and at 37, I've become my parents' favorite punchline. Senior product manager at Northbridge Analytics here in Cleveland, owner of a lakefront condo, marathon runner, none of it matters. To Dennis and Carol Lane, I'm just the daughter who failed at the only achievement that counts, landing a husband. The pre-gala dinner last week should have been elegant. Mom had the dining room staged like a magazine-spread crystal glasses catching candlelight, her best china gleaming against navy placemats. Dad wore his Princeton cufflinks, the ones he breaks out when he needs to feel important. My sister Brooke arrived from Shaker Heights with her perfect husband Todd and their 2 perfectly dressed children, completing the family portrait my parents desperately wanted. "Harper's here," Mom announced when I walked in, her voice pitched high with that particular strain of disappointment she's perfected over the years. Alone, of course. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Dad looked up from his scotch, already grinning. Still single at 37. He laughed, loud and performative, the way he does when he wants to make sure everyone gets the joke. I mean, Jesus, Harper, even Mrs. Henderson's daughter, you remember her, the one with the lazy eye, she managed to find someone. Brooke shifted uncomfortably, bouncing her toddler on her knee. "Dad, come on." "What, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." He took another sip, warming to his theme. "At this rate, we'll be introducing her as our spinster daughter at the gala. Here's Harper, married to her laptop." Mom touched her pearls, her nervous tell. "Actually, Dennis, I've arranged something. The Weatherby boy will be at our table tomorrow night. Recently divorced, very successful in commercial real estate. I've already mentioned Harper to his mother." "You what?" I kept my voice level, though my hand tightened around my water glass. "Someone has to take initiative, dear. You certainly haven't." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from the tablecloth. 37 isn't young anymore. Your eggs are practically expired." The room tilted slightly. I watched my mother discuss my reproductive system like she was reviewing quarterly reports. Brooke's husband Todd suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Even the kids sensed the tension, quietly pushing peas around their plates. "That's enough," I said quietly. Dad scoffed. "Oh, here we go. Harper's getting defensive again. This is exactly why you're alone, sweetheart. Too aggressive, too serious. Men don't want a woman who acts like a CEO in the bedroom." The words landed like slaps. I cataloged each one, filing them away in the mental folder I'd been building for years. Every dismissive laugh, every public humiliation, every time they'd made me feel like my accomplishments were consolation prizes for my real failure not being married. "You know what's funny?" Mom added, refilling her wine glass. "I was showing Louise Patterson your LinkedIn profile trying to talk you up. You understand, and she asked if you were one of those career women. I didn't know what to say." "You could have said I run a $30 million product line," I suggested. "Oh, Harper." Mom's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Nobody cares about that at a social event. They care about families, about legacy. What legacy do you have? A corner office?" Brooke tried to intervene. "Mom, Harper's successful. Successful at work." Dad interrupted. "But success as a woman, that's different. That's about fulfilling your biological purpose, contributing to the family line. Right now, Harper's just taking up space." Taking up space. The phrase echoed in my skull. 37 years of existence reduced to occupied square footage. They didn't know about the recording app running on my phone. tucked discreetly beside my purse. They didn't know about Elias, the ring I wore on a chain beneath my blouse, the marriage certificate filed quietly at City Hall 6 months ago. They certainly didn't know he'd be holding the microphone at tomorrow's gala, controlling the very stage where they planned to parade their social status. "The Weatherby boy will be perfect," Mom continued, lost in her matchmaking fantasy. "I'll introduce you during cocktail hour. Wear something feminine. Harper, that black suit you always choose makes you look like an undertaker." I smiled, the kind of smile I'd learned in boardrooms when men explained my own projects to me. "I'll wear something memorable. Mom, I promise." Dad raised his glass in mock celebration. "There's the spirit tomorrow night. We'll finally get Harper off the shelf, even if we have to mark her down for clearance." They all laughed. Even Brooke managed a nervous giggle. I memorized the sound, the way it filled the dining room, the way it tried to make me smaller. Tomorrow night. That laughter would cost them everything they'd built their reputation on. But tonight, I just smiled and nodded, playing the part of the desperate daughter one last time. The pattern started early. I was 14 when Mom first weaponized my existence against me. The Riverside Country Club's annual mother-daughter luncheon, an event she'd circled on the calendar in red ink. I'd worn the dress she picked, sat through the etiquette demonstration, smiled at her friends. Then Mrs. Garrett asked about my plans for the debutante ball. "Oh, Harper won't be participating," Mom announced to the entire table. "She's a bit awkward with boys. We're focusing on academics instead. Not everyone can be a social butterfly." 12 women turned to stare at me with varying degrees of pity. I learned that day how it felt to be branded defective in front of an audience. By high school, Dad had joined the game. Parent-teacher conferences became performance art. "Harper's grades are stellar," he'd tell teachers. Then pivot. If only she could transfer those skills to dating. I mean, what's the point of getting into Northwestern if you graduate without your MRS degree? Right? The teachers would laugh uncomfortably. I'd shrink into my chair, wishing I could dissolve into the industrial carpet. The real masterpiece came during Brooke's engagement party 5 years ago. The Lanes had rented the entire botanical garden, invited 300 guests, hired a string quartet. Mom assigned me to coat check duty. Someone needs to handle the practical matters, while Brooke floated through the crowd like a debutante queen. When I finally got 30 seconds at the microphone to toast my sister, Dad grabbed it from my hands. "That's enough from the single sister," he'd announced, getting the laugh he wanted. "We don't need a spinster's advice on marriage." Spinster. At 32. In front of everyone who mattered in Cleveland's social circuit. That night, I ran along Lake Erie until my lungs burned, until the city lights blurred through tears I refused to let fall. The next morning, I threw myself harder into work. If I couldn't be the daughter they wanted, I'd become someone they couldn't ignore. Senior product manager by 34, 6-figure salary, a view of the lake from my office window. But success just gave them new ammunition. "Harper's basically married to Northbridge Analytics," became Mom's favorite line at garden parties. "We've accepted that spreadsheets are our grandchildren." The truth is, I'd had relationships. Marcus in college, who Dad called that arts major until I stopped bringing him home. David during my 20s, whom Mom deemed not marriage material because he was a public school teacher. Each time I introduced someone, they found a way to make me feel like I was failing too desperate or not desperate enough, too picky or not discriminating enough. So when I met Elias Ward at a tech conference in Chicago, I kept him secret. He was speaking about media transformation in the digital age, brilliant, funny, commanding the stage with an ease that made 500 attendees lean forward in their seats. We talked for 3 hours at the hotel bar afterward about everything from artificial intelligence to Toni Morrison novels. He didn't care that I was aggressive or too serious. He loved that I challenged him, that I didn't soften my opinions to make him comfortable. "Your family sounds like a nightmare," he said 6 months later, after I'd finally told him about the engagement party incident. "They're just traditional. They're emotionally abusive." He didn't soften it, didn't dress it up. "Harper, you're brilliant, you're beautiful, you're everything, If they can't see that, it's their failure, not yours. We got married at Cleveland City Hall on a Tuesday afternoon in March. Just us. 2 witnesses we pulled from the hallway, and a judge who pronounced us husband and wife at 3:47 p.m. Elias wanted to announce it immediately, throw a party, shout it from his radio show. But I needed time. Time to figure out how to tell my parents that their spinster daughter had married someone they'd actually approve of if they could see past their own prejudice long enough to notice. Then, the Heritage Gala opportunity came up. The organizers wanted Elias as host. His reputation as the Midwest's premier event MC preceded him. When I learned my parents' social club was co-sponsoring, that Mom would be co-chairing the reception committee, that Dad was angling for a board position, I knew. This wasn't just an opportunity. This was destiny wrapped in irony, served on a silver platter. Let's keep the marriage quiet a little longer, I told Elias. Just until after the gala. He studied me, reading something in my face. You're planning something. I'm planning to tell the truth. Just strategically. He pulled me close, kissing my forehead. Remind me never to get on your bad side. But I wasn't on anyone's bad side. I was just done being on my knees, begging for approval that would never come. They'd drawn first blood when I was 14. Tomorrow night. I'd show them what 37 years of their cuts had created not a spinster, but a woman who'd learned to sharpen her wounds into weapons. The Cleveland Heritage Gala was my parents' Olympics. For 3 months, Mom had strategically name-dropped it at every salon appointment, grocery store encounter, and gym conversation. Dad upgraded his country club membership just to golf with the planning committee. They'd donated $20,000 they couldn't really afford, all for the privilege of being listed as Gold Circle sponsors in the program. This is our moment, Mom had told me last month. The Weatherbys will be there, the Carmichaels, everyone who matters in Cleveland society. Don't embarrass us, Harper. Now, sitting in my downtown office at 9:30 p.m. I reviewed the chess pieces I'd carefully positioned over the past week. First, the leverage. Northbridge Analytics was the gala's platinum sponsor, a $50,000 commitment I'd personally pushed through our corporate giving committee. That bought me a speaking slot and, more importantly, editorial input on the program. The event coordinator, a young woman named Jessica who was desperate to keep our company happy, had accepted every suggestion I'd made. We'd like to include a segment on family values in the workplace, I'd told her yesterday. Something multimedia, really impactful. I have some content prepared. Of course, Ms. Lane. Should we run it by the committee? No need. As the platinum sponsor representative, I'll take full responsibility. Second, the evidence. My phone contained 3 years of recordings legally obtained in Ohio, a one-party consent state. The greatest hits included Dad's biological purpose speech, Mom's basically married to spreadsheets routine, and last week's dinner conversation in crystal clear audio. I'd edited together a 90-second montage, voices only, with subtitles for clarity. No faces, no names displayed, just the words themselves, hanging in the air like the accusations they were. Third, the script. Elias had sent me his host notes, and I'd made strategic additions, where he'd introduced the family values segment. I'd inserted a brief preamble about the language we use with those we claim to love. He'd trusted me completely, not even reviewing the changes. "Whatever you need to do," he'd said, kissing me goodbye this morning. "I've got your back." My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Don't forget cocktails at 6:30 sharp tomorrow. Wear the pink dress I sent. The Weatherby boy likes feminine women." The pink dress. A monstrosity of ruffles and bows that looked like a baby shower cake had exploded. She'd had it delivered to my office, causing my assistant to ask if I was in a wedding. As a bridesmaid? For a teenager. I pulled up the gala's seating chart on my laptop. Table 2, Dennis Lane, Carol Lane, Brooke Sullivan, Todd Sullivan. Table 3. The Weatherbys, close enough for Mom's matchmaking convenience. Far enough that I could watch their faces when the reveal happened. Another text. This one from Brooke. Mom's lost her mind about tomorrow. She told her book club you're finally ready to settle down. Please don't make a scene. A scene. That's what they called it when I defended myself. When I asked them to stop. When I simply existed outside their narrow definition of success. Tomorrow wouldn't be a scene, it would be a reckoning. Scheduled and scripted, with 300 witnesses. I opened the audio file one more time, listening to my father's voice echo through my empty office. Still single at 37. The laugh that followed sounded different now, not powerful but pathetic. The desperate cackle of a man who needed to diminish his daughter to feel big. My computer pinged with an email from Jessica. Hi, Ms. Lane. Everything's set for tomorrow. Your multimedia segment is loaded and ready to go. It'll play right after Mr. Ward's introduction, as requested. The AV team has tested everything twice. This is going to be amazing, amazing. She had no idea. I locked my office and headed home to the condo my parents had never visited, too modern. Mom had sniffed when she saw the photos. All that glass and steel, no warmth. No wonder you're alone there. Except I wasn't alone. Elias was waiting. Takeout containers from our favorite Thai place spread across the kitchen counter. Ready for tomorrow? He asked, handing me a glass of wine. They want me to wear a pink dress and flirt with someone named Weatherby. And what are you going to wear? I smiled, thinking of the black dress hanging in my closet. Sleek, professional, powerful, everything they hated. Something memorable. I promised Mom. That's my girl. He raised his glass. To truth-telling. To consequences, I corrected. Tomorrow. My parents would learn what happened when you spent decades sharpening your tongue on your daughter's dignity. They'd created their own perfect storm, a room full of people they desperately wanted to impress. A microphone in the hands of my husband, and a daughter who'd finally stopped trying to earn their love. The gala program sat on my coffee table, gold embossed and pristine. Inside, my parents' names were listed prominently under gold circle sponsors. By tomorrow night, everyone would know exactly what kind of people they were sponsoring. The Wilder at Terminal Tower gleamed like a jewel box against Cleveland's night sky. 7:45 p.m., and the ballroom was already thick with perfume, ambition, and the particular energy of people who'd paid $500 a plate to be seen caring about charity. I arrived deliberately late, missing cocktail hour and Mom's planned ambush with the Weatherby boy. The black dress moved like water, sophisticated, expensive, utterly inappropriate by Carol Lane's standards. My wedding ring, usually hidden on a chain, sat on my finger tonight, delicate enough to miss if you weren't looking. But I was done hiding. Harper. Mom's voice cut through the jazz quartet. She stood near the entrance in emerald satin, her face cycling through emotions, relief that I'd shown, horror at my dress, fury at my tardiness. Where have you been? The Weatherbys had to check something with the AV team, I said smoothly. Platinum sponsor duties. Dad appeared at her elbow, his bow tie slightly crooked from what was clearly not his first scotch. Christ, Harper, you look like you're going to a funeral. Would it kill you to show some skin? Some femininity? The night's just starting, I said. Trust me. Everyone will remember what I'm wearing. Brooke glided over, her phone already out for the inevitable Instagram stories. Her cornflower blue gown coordinated perfectly with Todd's pocket square. They looked like cake toppers. Harper, Mom's been telling everyone you're ready to date seriously. Mrs. Pemberton actually asked if you'd considered freezing your eggs. How thoughtful of Mrs. Pemberton. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the transition from cocktails to dinner. I watched my parents navigate to table 2, Mom stopping every 3 feet to air kiss someone, Dad glad-handing like he was running for office. They lived for this, the performance, the positioning, the careful cultivation of their social standing. What they didn't notice was me slipping backstage. The AV booth was tucked behind a black curtain, manned by a 20-something guy named Derek who'd already tested my video file 3 times. We're good to go, Ms. Lane, he confirmed, pulling up the cue sheet. Right after Mr. Ward's introduction to the family values segment, like we discussed. Perfect. And the volume, crystal clear. Every word will be audible. Every word. Still single at 37. Biological purpose. Taking up space. All of it. About to echo through a ballroom full of people my parents had spent years trying to impress. I returned to find Elias taking the stage. My husband, God. The thrill of that word commanded the room instantly. His tux was perfectly tailored, his presence magnetic. 300 people fell silent as he approached the podium. Good evening, Cleveland. His voice rolled through the space like warm honey. Welcome to an extraordinary night of celebration and community. Mom preened at her table, whispering something to Mrs. Carmichael about how they'd personally selected tonight's host. Dad straightened his bow tie, basking in reflected glory. Neither of them noticed me standing by the tech booth, my hand steady on my phone, recording their proud faces for posterity. The program moved through its opening segments, welcome remarks, acknowledgement of sponsors, a brief video about the charity. Then Elias shifted, his tone becoming more intimate. Before we continue, he said, I want to share something personal. Tonight's theme is about building stronger families and communities. But sometimes, we need to examine the language we use with those closest to us. The words we choose when we think no one's listening. Mom tilted her head, intrigued. Dad leaned forward. Brooke was live streaming. Of course, holding her phone at the perfect angle to catch the stage. Our platinum sponsor, Northbridge Analytics, has prepared a brief presentation about family communication. Elias continued, Some of it might surprise you. It certainly opened my eyes. The lights dimmed further. The massive LED screens flanking the stage flickered to life. Derek, right on cue, hit play. The first voice that filled the ballroom was Dad's. Still single at 37. The laugh that followed seemed to echo off the crystal chandeliers. The subtitles appeared in elegant script, a father discussing his daughter. Then Mom, your eggs are practically expired. The clinical cruelty of it seemed magnified by the speaker system. I watched their faces in the screen's blue glow. Mom's hand flew to her pearls. Dad's scotch stopped halfway to his lips. What legacy do you have, a corner office? Dad's recorded voice continued. Success as a woman means fulfilling your biological purpose. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some guests were looking around, trying to identify the voices. Others sat frozen, uncomfortable with the unexpected intimacy of family cruelty laid bare. Even if we have to mark her down for clearance. Dad's final joke landed like a punch. The recording ended with that same laugh, the one that had haunted my childhood, my 20s, my 30s. The screens went dark. The ballroom held its breath. Elias returned to the microphone, his expression professionally neutral. Powerful words. Now, I'd like to invite someone special to share her perspective on family, success, and the languages of love. That was my cue. I walked toward the stage, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. Mom's face had gone pale beneath her foundation. Dad was looking around wildly, as if searching for an exit, but there was no escape. They were trapped by their own careful seating selection front and center, exactly where they'd wanted to be. I took the microphone from Elias, our fingers brushing briefly a touch that steadied me. The spotlight was warm on my face, transforming the ballroom into a sea of shadows with only my parents' table still visible, illuminated by their proximity to the stage. Good evening, I began, my voice carrying the same professional calm I used for board presentations. I'm Harper Lane, Senior Product Manager at Northbridge Analytics. But tonight, I want to tell you a different story about titles and values. A few people shifted in their seats. Mom sat frozen, her knuckles white around her champagne flute. There's a woman I know, I continued, settling into the rhythm of storytelling. 37 years old. She runs a $30 million product line. She owns her home. She volunteers at the literacy center downtown. By most metrics, she's what we'd call successful. Sympathetic murmurs from the crowd. Several women nodded, but in her family's eyes, she's a failure. You see, she committed the unforgivable sin of being unmarried. Every achievement becomes a consolation prize. Every milestone gets asterisked with, but she's still single. Her worth, measured not in contributions or character, but in her relationship status. Dad started to stand. Brooke grabbed his arm, hissing something urgent. Her phone was still recording, though her hand shook slightly. That woman was told she was taking up space, that her eggs were expired, that she needed to be marked down for clearance. I let each phrase hang in the air. Not by strangers on the internet, not by some abstract misogynist, by the people who claimed to love her most. The ballroom was silent now, that particular quiet of 300 people holding their breath. The recording you just heard, I gestured to the dark screens. Those were parents talking about their daughter, not in private therapy, not in a moment of frustration, but at a family dinner, with laughter as punctuation. The kind of casual cruelty that gets served alongside the pot roast, someone at table 7 whispered. Is that Dennis Lane's voice? The whisper carried, I found Mrs. Pemberton in the crowd, the egg-freezing advocate, and made eye contact. We talk about family values, but what values are we modeling when we reduce women to their marital status? When we teach daughters that professional success means nothing without a ring? When we make jokes about clearance sales on human beings? Mom's face had progressed from pale to ashen. Dad's was deep red, the color of barely contained rage. That woman in the story, she could have internalized those messages, could have believed she was worthless, could have settled for anyone willing to validate her existence. I paused, letting the moment build. Instead, she thrived. She built a career. She found love on her own terms, with someone who sees her as a whole person, not a problem to solve. Elias moved closer to the podium, a subtle show of support that wouldn't be lost on the audience. But here's the thing about emotional abuse disguised as humor, it leaves scars. Every joke cuts a little deeper. Every public humiliation takes something from you. That woman spent years believing she had to earn her parents' love by fitting into their narrow definition of success. I looked directly at my parents' table. She doesn't believe that anymore. The crowd was starting to piece it together. I could see the recognition dawning on faces, people who knew my parents, who'd heard their poor Harper routine at countless social gatherings. Northbridge Analytics values diversity in all forms. I continued, shifting to corporate speak that would resonate with this audience, including the diversity to choose your own path, to define success on your own terms, to refuse to be diminished by outdated expectations. Todd was trying to coax Brooke to stop recording. She shrugged him off, her face a mixture of horror and fascination. Tonight, we're here to support families. Real families. The ones that build each other up instead of tearing them down for sport. The ones that celebrate achievements without qualifiers. The ones that understand love isn't conditional on meeting a checklist. I lifted the microphone, my voice gaining strength. To anyone who's been told they're not enough because they're single, divorced, childless, or simply different from what was expected, you are complete. You are worthy. You are not a clearance item waiting to be marked down. The applause started slowly, one woman at table 5, then another at table 8. It built like a wave, spreading through the ballroom. Not everyone was clapping, some sat stunned. Others whispered urgently, but enough to make my point. Mom's champagne glass tumbled to the table, spilling golden liquid across the white tablecloth. The stain spread like shame. Before I go, I said, raising my voice over the applause, I want to thank the event organizers for this platform, and especially our wonderful host tonight. I turned to Elias, letting the moment stretch. He stepped forward, taking my hand. The wedding ring caught the light. Who happens to be someone very special to me? The applause faltered, replaced by confused murmuring. Mom's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Dad was half standing, gripping the table like it might collapse. I smiled at the crowd, then directly at my parents. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting married, it's revealing you already are on your own terms, in your own time, to someone who never needed you to be marked down to see your value. The ballroom held its collective breath as Elias stepped fully into the spotlight, his hand still holding mine. The confusion in the air was almost tangible. 300 people trying to process what they were witnessing. "Thank you for that powerful message," Elias said into his microphone, his broadcaster's voice perfectly modulated. Then he turned to face the audience fully, and his tone shifted warmer, more personal. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have the extraordinary privilege of introducing someone properly. The woman beside me isn't just a representative of our platinum sponsor. She's not just an accomplished executive who shared a crucial message about family values." He lifted our joined hands, the wedding rings now impossible to miss under the stage lights. "This is Harper Ward, my wife." The gasp that rippled through the ballroom was audible. At table 2, Carol Lane's face went from ashen to ghostly. Dennis shot to his feet so fast his chair toppled backward, the crash echoing through the stunned silence. "We married 6 months ago," Elias continued, his voice carrying easily through the space. "A private ceremony, which we chose to keep intimate for personal reasons. Though I suspect," he glanced at my parents' table, "some of those reasons are becoming clearer." Brooke's phone clattered to the table. Her live stream was still running, broadcasting this moment to her 800 followers, mostly other Shaker Heights moms who knew our family, who'd heard Mom's lamentations about her poor single daughter at every book club and charity luncheon. The whispers started immediately. Harper Lane married Elias Ward, the Elias Ward from the morning show, 6 months ago. But Carol said she was desperate. Dad's voice cut through the murmurs, loud and aggressive. "This is inappropriate. This is a charity event, not a what, Mr. Lane?" Elias responded smoothly. "Not a place for truth, not a venue for addressing the kind of emotional violence that tears families apart." He squeezed my hand. "Your daughter stands here as one of the most accomplished people in this room. She's brilliant, kind, successful by every meaningful measure. Yet you've spent years diminishing her because she didn't meet your arbitrary timeline for marriage." Mom finally found her voice, high and strained. "Harper, how could you?" The humiliation. I spoke directly into my microphone, cutting her off. "Let's talk about humiliation. Mom, like Brooke's engagement party, when Dad grabbed the microphone from me because spinsters shouldn't give marriage advice. Or every holiday dinner where you updated the extended family on my tragic single status. Or last week, when you actually laughed while calling me expired goods. The woman at table 6, Mrs. Weatherby, I realized was staring at my mother with undisguised horror. Her son, the divorced real estate developer Mom had been so eager to foist on me, looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "You know what's truly humiliating," I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Having parents who see their daughter's worth only through the lens of whether a man has claimed her, parents who would rather parade her around like livestock at auction than celebrate her actual accomplishments." Dennis started pushing through the tables toward the stage, his face purple with rage. 2 security guards, standard for events this size, moved to intercept him. "Sir, please return to your seat," one said firmly. "That's my daughter," Dad bellowed. "This is a family matter." "No," Elias said, his voice cutting through Dad's bluster. "It stopped being a family matter when you made your cruelty public sport, when you turned Harper's personal life into dinner party entertainment, when you sent her to therapy not for help, but to fix her singleness." That detail, one I'd shared with Elias in private, landed like a bomb. The crowd's sympathy was shifting palpably, no longer torn between confusion and discomfort. People were choosing sides, and it wasn't the side my parents had expected. "The theme tonight is building stronger families," I said, addressing the room but keeping my eyes on my parents. "Here's how you don't do it. You don't mock your children for their choices. You don't reduce them to their relationship status. You don't treat marriage like it's the only achievement that matters. Mom was crying now, not pretty tears, but the ugly kind that ruined makeup and revealed the cracks beneath the surface. We only wanted what was best. You wanted what looked best, I corrected. There's a difference. Brooke finally stood, her face flushed. For a moment, I thought she'd defend them. Instead, she looked at our parents and said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "She's right. You've been cruel to Harper my whole life. I got married at 23 and you act like I cured cancer, while Harper runs a multi-million-dollar division and you call her a failure." The betrayal on Mom's face was complete. Her golden child, her success story, had just switched sides in front of Cleveland's elite. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elias said, taking control of the narrative with professional ease, "Harper and I chose to keep our marriage private because we wanted to build our foundation without interference, without unsolicited opinions or manufactured drama, without the toxic pressure of people who believe a woman's value expires at 30. He looked directly at my parents. "Dennis and Carol Lane, you've spent years telling everyone your daughter was defective goods, too aggressive, too career-focused, expired, on clearance. Well, Cleveland, I'm here to tell you that your clearance item is the most extraordinary woman I've ever met, and the only thing expired here is your outdated worldview." The applause this time was thunderous. People stood first one table, then another, then most of the room. A standing ovation not for charity or achievement, but for truth finally spoken aloud. The standing ovation continued, but I wasn't finished. I raised my hand, and the crowd gradually settled back into their seats, hungry for whatever came next. This was better than any gossip they'd feast on for months. "Thank you," I said, my voice clear and cold. "But I need to finish what I started. You see, this isn't about revenge, it's about accountability." Dad was still being contained by security near table 5, his face cycling between purple rage and white shock. Mom had collapsed back into her chair, her carefully constructed facade in ruins. "At Northbridge Analytics, we have a principle," I continued. "We believe in data-driven decisions. So let's look at the data." I pulled out my phone. Though I didn't need it, every word was burned into my memory. 17 times in the past year, my parents told people I was still single at public events. 12 times, they used the word spinster. 8 times, they suggested something was wrong with me for prioritizing my career. Mrs. Carmichael, Mom's book club president, was recording everything on her phone now. By tomorrow, this would be everywhere. "But here's the interesting part," I said. 0 times did they mention my promotion to senior product manager. 0 times did they talk about the scholarship fund I established at Cleveland State. 0 times did they celebrate anything about me that didn't involve a man. I looked directly at them. "So let me be clear. In this room full of witnesses, you don't get to claim credit for my success now. You don't get to suddenly become proud parents of Elias Ward's wife. You spent years tearing me down in public. This is simply returning the favor." Dennis broke free from security's polite restraint, storming toward the stage. "How dare you air family business? Like you did," I cut him off. "Every cocktail party, every golf game, every single opportunity to tell someone your daughter was defective." I turned to address him directly. "You said I was taking up space." "Dad, well, tonight, I'm taking up exactly the space I deserve." "This is defamation," he shouted. "I'll sue." "It's your own words," Elias interjected smoothly. "Recorded legally in a one-party consent state, shared in a private event venue. Your daughter's lawyer, yes. She has one already vetted everything. But please, Dennis, tell a room full of witnesses how you plan to sue your daughter for repeating what you said." The legal threat deflated like a punctured balloon. Dad stood there, breathing heavily, his tuxedo disheveled, his dignity in tatters. I pressed on. "The saddest part, I'm good at my job because of what you put me through. I learned to anticipate criticism, to over-prepare, to never show weakness. The skills you forced me to develop while defending myself at every family dinner, they made me unstoppable in the boardroom. But they also made me believe I was never enough, that love was conditional, that I had to earn my place at every table, including my own family's. Mom finally spoke, her voice breaking. "We just wanted you to be happy." "No," I said firmly. "You wanted me to make you happy, to fit into your narrow definition of success so you could show me off like a trophy. My happiness was never part of the equation." Elias took the microphone back, his professional composure intact despite the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief intermission, but before we do, I want to announce something. Northbridge Analytics will be funding a new initiative, a mentorship program for young women entering the corporate world. It will be called the Enough Project." He looked at my parents. "Because every woman is enough, exactly as she is. Single, married, divorced, widowed enough. No clearance necessary." The applause erupted again. People were approaching the stage now, women wanting to shake my hand, to share their own stories. I saw tears on faces, recognition in eyes how many of them had their own version of Dennis and Carol Lane. But Dad wasn't done. He lunged toward the microphone stand, desperate to salvage something. "She's lying, we supported her, we paid for college." "Which you've held over my head for 15 years, I said, my voice cutting through his protests. "Every achievement I've ever had, you've claimed credit for because you paid tuition. Well, here's a check." I pulled an envelope from my clutch, one I'd prepared for this exact moment. $47,000. Every cent you spent on my education, plus interest. We're even... I tossed the envelope. It fluttered through the air, landing at his feet. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. "Harper!" Brooke approached the stage, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I should have stood up for you years ago. I was just..." "You were the golden child," I said, not unkindly. They needed one success story to justify their treatment of me. "I don't blame you, Brooke. But I don't forgive you either. Not yet." She nodded, accepting that truth with more grace than our parents had shown all evening. Elias wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me close. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue with the program in 10 minutes. The silent auction is open, and I encourage you to be generous. After all," he looked at my parents one last time, "some of us have learned tonight how much words can cost." Security finally escorted Dad back to his table, where he slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. Mom sat frozen, staring at the envelope on the floor, $47,000, the price she'd put on parental love, thrown back in her face. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, not wanting to miss whatever might happen next. But I was done. I'd said what needed saying, revealed what needed revealing. "Let's go," I whispered to Elias. "The show must go on," he whispered back. "But your part is done. You were magnificent." The 10-minute intermission stretched like an eternity. I stood backstage, watching through the curtain gap as my parents sat frozen at their table, two statues in designer clothing, their carefully curated world in ruins. Around them, Cleveland's elite buzzed with electric gossip. Phones glowed everywhere. By tomorrow morning, everyone would know. Carol tried to leave twice. Both times, women from her book club intercepted her not to comfort, but to stare, to extract details, to feast on the carnage of her social death. Dennis sat hunched, the envelope still on the floor by his feet, too proud to pick it up, too broken to walk away. Elias returned to the stage at exactly 8:55 p.m. Professional mask firmly in place. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's continue our evening. But first, a reminder about tonight's lesson in family values. Words matter. Choose them wisely." The rest of the gala proceeded with surreal normalcy. Awards were given, speeches made, auctions conducted. But the energy had fundamentally shifted. Every mention of family, success, or values carried new weight, new meaning. People kept glancing at table 2, where my parents sat like ghosts at their own funeral. I didn't return to the ballroom. Instead, I waited in the lobby, watching through the glass doors as the evening wound down. Brooke found me there at 10:15 p.m. Her makeup ruined, her perfect image cracked. "They're leaving," she said quietly. "Dad won't speak. Mom keeps saying, 'How could she?' over and over." "How could I?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. How could they? For 23 years. How could they? "The Weatherbys left right after intermission," Brooke added. "Mrs. Weatherby told Mom she was disgusted, said she'd never have agreed to the setup if she'd known what kind of people—" She stopped. "Everyone knows now. Everyone." Good. We stood in silence, two sisters separated by more than just birth order. Finally, Brooke said, "Your husband seems wonderful." "He is. He sees me." Brooke actually sees me. Not as a problem to solve or a disappointment to manage, just me. She nodded, understanding perhaps for the first time what that meant. "Will you ever forgive them?" "That's not tonight's question," I said. Tonight was about truth, forgiveness. If it comes, will take years they probably don't have. Elias appeared, still in his tux but looser now, the bow tie undone. Ready to go home. Mrs. Ward, in public, out loud. The simple acknowledgement of who I really was felt like freedom. As we walked to the valet stand, we passed my parents loading into their Lexus. Mom saw me and opened her mouth, perhaps to plead, perhaps to condemn, but no words came. Dad stared straight ahead, a broken king in a rented throne. They drove away in silence, taillights disappearing into Cleveland's darkness. "Any regrets?" Elias asked, pulling me close against the November chill. "No," I said, and meant it. They wrote the script for tonight years ago. I just finally gave them the ending they deserved. My phone buzzed with notifications messages from colleagues, from cousins who'd seen Brooke's live stream, from women I'd never met who'd found my story through social media. The video was already viral in Cleveland's social circles. By morning, it would be everywhere. One message stood out, from Jessica, the event coordinator, Ms. Lane, Mrs. Ward. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. My mom calls me a failure too, still single at 31. Thank you for saying what we all needed to hear. The valet brought our car, Elias's Tesla, not the sensible Honda my parents always mocked. As we drove away from the Wilder, I looked back once at the glowing tower where 300 people had witnessed my truth. "What now?" Elias asked. "Now we go home. We live our life. We be happy." I twisted my wedding ring, letting it catch the streetlights. "And we never apologize for being enough." The city flowed past the windows, Cleveland in all its post-industrial glory, a place of rebuilding, reinvention, rising from old wounds. Like me. My phone rang. Mom's number. I declined the call, then blocked it, then Dad's, then Brooke's. Tonight wasn't about reconciliation or explanation. It was about finally, after 37 years, choosing myself. "You know they'll try to spin this," Elias said. "Make themselves the victims. Let them." Everyone heard their own words. Everyone saw their reaction. The truth doesn't need spin. We drove home to our high-rise condo, the one my parents called cold, but which felt warm to me. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the city lights like stars. Our wedding photo sat on the mantel, just us. The courthouse steps. Genuine smiles. No family. No fanfare. No judgment. "I love you," Elias said, pulling me onto the couch. Not despite tonight, but especially because of it. Even though I just destroyed my parents in front of Cleveland's elite, especially because you stood up and said enough, because you refused to be marked down, because you know your worth, and you made damn sure everyone else knows it too. I thought about the envelope. $47,000 lying on the ballroom floor. The price of their love, returned with interest. The accounts were settled, the debt paid, the silence broken. Tomorrow would bring consequences, calls from relatives, family friends taking sides, maybe legal threats that would go nowhere. But tonight, I was free. Tonight, I was Harper Ward, complete and enough, married to a man who never needed me to be anyone but myself. The city sparkled below us, Cleveland in all its complicated glory. Somewhere across town, my parents were arriving home to their suburban perfect house, their perfect image shattered, their authority over me finally, irreversibly broken. I smiled. Still single at 37, had become married on my own terms. Their punchline had become my power. Their cruelty had become my catalyst. The last laugh was mine. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let me know your thoughts on Harper's journey. Did she go too far? Or did her parents deserve every moment of that revelation? I can't wait to hear your perspective.